Naledi had always believed that she and her sister Kayla were unbreakable. After losing their parents, they became each other's whole world, sharing everything, laughter, secrets, even their pain. Living together in their small home in Accra felt like safety. But lately, that warmth had begun to fade. It started when Kayla met Tumo. He was charming at first, always smiling and polite. But Naledi noticed how his smile never reached his eyes when she was around. He didn't like how close the sisters were. Little by little, he began whispering things into Kayla's ear. Naledi controls you too much. She doesn't want you to have your own life. Slowly, those words started to take root. Kayla became distant. She spent more time with Tumo, less time talking to her sister. When she did speak to Naledi, her tone was sharp, defensive, like every word was a battle. One evening, it all came crashing down. They were arguing about money and house chores, voices rising, patience thinning. Then Kayla suddenly exploded. "You're so toxic, Naledi. You ruin everything you touch," she screamed. The words hit like a slap. Naledi froze. The room went silent except for her shaky breathing. She looked at her sister, the same sister she had once called her best friend, and saw only anger staring back. Without saying a word, Naledi turned away, packed a small bag, and walked out into the cool Accra night. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't stop walking. She just needed to breathe, to get away before her heart broke anymore. Naledi found a small room to rent near her workplace. It wasn't much, just a narrow space with a single bed, a small table, and a window that looked out onto a noisy street. But it was hers. The first night, she sat on the bed in silence, listening to the sound of distant traffic and feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. Her sister's words, "You're so toxic, Naledi," echoed in her head like a song she couldn't turn off. Every night was the same. She'd come home from work, take off her shoes, and sit quietly, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes she'd cry. Other times she'd scroll through old pictures of her and Kayla, the two of them laughing, cooking, dancing in their old living room, and wonder how love had turned into something so cold. She missed her sister, but the hurt was too deep to reach out. Every time she thought of calling, she'd stop herself. She didn't want to beg for space in a heart that had already shut her out. At work, her coworkers noticed the change in her. Naledi used to be the one who always smiled, the one who brought snacks for everyone and made small jokes to lighten the mood. Now she was quiet. She did her job, kept her head down, and spoke only when needed. One afternoon, during lunch, her coworker Amma sat beside her and said softly, "You know, sometimes silence is the loudest answer." Those words stuck with Naledi. That night, she thought about them over and over. Maybe she didn't need to fix everything right away. Maybe the best thing she could do was let the silence speak for her, to heal in peace instead of chasing the people who broke her. So she started taking small steps. She cooked simple meals, rice and stew, sometimes fried plantain when she wanted comfort. She played soft music while she cleaned. On Sundays, she went to church alone, sitting quietly in the back pew, praying for strength instead of revenge. Slowly, she began to feel lighter. The room that once felt empty started to feel peaceful. She bought a small plant for her window, started journaling her thoughts, and took evening walks after work. Each little thing reminded her that she was still alive, still capable of finding joy. She still thought of Kayla, of course. Some nights she whispered a prayer for her sister, hoping she was okay. But this time, Naledi didn't try to fix the distance between them. She just accepted it. Maybe love didn't always mean holding on. Maybe it also meant learning to let go. And for the first time in a long while, as she lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city, Naledi finally felt a little bit of peace. At first, Kayla thought she finally had everything she wanted. The house felt quieter without Naledi's presence, and Tumo was always around, calling her my queen, promising her a better life. She told herself this was peace. No arguments, no judgments, just love. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. It started small. Tumo would make comments about her clothes. "Why are you wearing that? It's too tight." Or, "I don't like when other men look at you." At first, she laughed it off, thinking he was just being protective. But soon it became rules. "Don't wear makeup. Don't go out without telling me. Delete that guy's number." His tone changed from soft to sharp, and Kayla found herself apologizing for things she didn't even do wrong. He started checking her phone, scrolling through her messages, asking who every name belonged to. The first time he did it, she tried to protest, but he raised his voice. "If you've got nothing to hide, then why are you scared?" he said. That night, she cried quietly in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear. Whenever she mentioned Naledi, his expression turned cold. "You're better off without her," he would say with a sneer. "She always wanted to control you. She's jealous of you." The words twisted something inside Kayla. She tried to believe him, but a part of her, a small, quiet part, still missed her sister. She remembered how Naledi used to check on her when she was sick, how they used to laugh while cooking, how her sister always made her feel safe. Now the house didn't feel safe at all. It felt heavy, filled with unspoken tension. She found herself walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Tomo's mood could shift in seconds, one moment affectionate, the next stormy and cold. Kayla began to lose pieces of herself, trying to keep him calm. She stopped seeing her friends, stopped going out as much, stopped smiling the way she used to. Sometimes she'd sit alone on the couch and think about Nality. She'd replay that awful night in her head, the way she screamed those cruel words. The memory made her chest ache. What if Nality wasn't the problem? What if Tomo was the one poisoning everything? But her pride kept her from picking up the phone. She didn't want to admit that she'd been wrong, that she'd hurt the only person who truly loved her. So she stayed silent. Every day, she told herself things would get better, that Tomo would change, that maybe love just needed patience. But deep down, she knew the truth. The peace she thought she'd found was fake. And as much as she tried to ignore it, the cracks were widening. The house was no longer a home, and the man she thought she loved was slowly turning into a stranger. Late one night, Kayla sat on her bed, the room dim except for the soft glow of her phone screen. The house was quiet, too quiet. Tomo had gone out again, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She scrolled through her gallery aimlessly until she stumbled on old photos, pictures of her and Nality. The two of them laughing while cooking, dancing in their tiny living room, wearing matching dresses for their parents' memorial. The more she swiped, the heavier her chest felt. Each photo was a memory of a time when love was simple, before words turned sharp and pride built walls between them. Her thumb hovered over one picture of them hugging, cheeks pressed together, smiles wide and real. Without thinking, she opened her messages and started typing. I miss you. Can we talk? She stared at the words for a long time, her heart pounding. It felt like she could almost hear Nality's voice again, calm, soft. For a brief second, she imagined her sister replying, I've missed you too. But then fear crept in. What if Nality didn't want to hear from her? What if she'd moved on? What if Kayla's message just reopened old wounds? Tears blurred her screen. She sighed, backspaced the message slowly until the chat was empty again, then locked her phone. The silence of the room pressed in. Kayla buried her face in her hands and let the tears fall freely. She wanted to reach out so badly, but her pride whispered, not yet. Meanwhile, across the city, Nality was beginning to breathe again. Her small rented room no longer felt like an escape. It felt like home. She had added little touches to it, a soft curtain, a few photos on the wall, a plant she named Hope. Her mornings were peaceful now. She'd make tea, open her window to the smell of roasted corn from the street below, and feel the quiet comfort of a life that didn't revolve around pain anymore. At work, she laughed more. Her coworker Amma often invited her to lunch, and the two of them would share stories over jollof rice and bottled drink. Nality found herself smiling without forcing it. Some evenings, she'd cook while music played from her phone, humming along like she used to. It wasn't the same as before, but it was enough. Still, sometimes late at night, she'd feel an ache, a quiet pull in her heart that reminded her of her sister. She'd think about Kayla and wonder if she was okay, if she was happy, if she missed her too. But she never picked up the phone either. She told herself that peace didn't always mean reunion, that some love was safer from a distance. And so, both sisters lay awake that night, miles apart but connected by the same silence, both holding on to words they couldn't yet say. A week later, Kayla's world began to fall apart piece by piece. It started with a call from her boss. Her voice was firm but tired. Kayla, we've given you too many chances. You've missed too many days of work. We can't keep you on anymore. Kayla tried to explain. The late nights, the arguments, the exhaustion, but the words stuck in her throat. The truth was, she hadn't been herself in a long time. Tomo's jealousy had swallowed her whole. Every time she tried to leave for work, he'd accuse her of meeting someone else. Every time her phone rang, he demanded to know who was calling. Slowly, her world had shrunk to him and his moods. When she hung up the phone, she just sat there, numb. Her job was the one thing she still had control over, and now even that was gone. The house felt darker that day, as if the walls themselves were closing in. That night, Tomo came home later than usual, smelling of alcohol. Kayla gathered her courage and told him she'd lost her job. She expected comfort, maybe a little understanding. Instead, he exploded. Of course you did. You can't even keep a simple job without messing it up, he shouted, pacing the room like a storm. Kayla tried to stay calm. I lost it because I was trying to keep you happy, she said quietly. That one sentence was enough to set him off. His face twisted with rage. Don't blame me for your failures, he screamed. And before she could even react, his hand came down hard across her face. The sound echoed in the small room, sharp, cruel, final. For a moment, time stopped. Kayla touched her cheek, stunned. Her eyes filled with tears, but her body froze. She couldn't believe it. The man who had promised to love her, to protect her, had just hit her. Tomo's breathing was heavy, his eyes wild, but she didn't wait for another word. She grabbed her bag, stumbled toward the door, and ran. Outside, the night air hit her face, mixing with her tears. Her hands trembled as she walked aimlessly through the quiet streets of Accra. Her mind was spinning, shame, fear, heartbreak all crashing at once. She didn't know where to go, but her heart did. It led her to the one person she'd pushed away, the one person who had always loved her without condition. By the time she reached Naledi's neighborhood, her legs felt weak. She stopped in front of her sister's building, staring up at the window with the faint light still on. Her heart pounded. She had called Naledi toxic, screamed that she ruined everything. And yet, standing there bruised and broken, all she wanted was her sister's arms around her. Taking a shaky breath, Kayla climbed the steps, tears still streaming down her face. She didn't know if Naledi would forgive her, but she knew this. She couldn't survive another night alone. It was late at night, and Naledi was just about to sleep. The streets outside were quiet, only the distant sound of a taxi passing by. She had just turned off her light when she heard it, a soft knock at the door. At first, she thought she imagined it, but then it came again, louder this time, desperate. Her heart skipped. Nobody ever came to her place this late. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and walked to the door, a strange mix of worry and curiosity bubbling inside her. When she opened it, the world seemed to stop. Kayla was standing there. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen and red from crying. A bruise darkened her cheek. Her clothes were wrinkled, and she looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in days. For a few long seconds, neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other, frozen in shock and pain. Then Kayla's lips started trembling. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Nail. You were never toxic." "I was." The moment the words left her mouth, she broke down completely. She fell into tears, shoulders shaking as she covered her face with her hand. Naledi felt her heart twist. She wanted to be angry, to ask why. Why now? Why after all the pain and silence? But looking at her sister, bruised, broken, and crying on her doorstep, all the anger melted away. Without saying a word, she stepped forward and wrapped Kayla in her arms. Kayla clung to her tightly, sobbing into her shoulder like a child. Naledi held her close, her own eyes filling with tears. "Shoo," she whispered softly. "You're safe now." She led Kayla inside and closed the door behind them. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp, but it felt warm compared to the cold night outside. Naledi guided her sister to sit on the couch and grabbed a blanket, wrapping it gently around her shoulder. Kayla sat there shivering, still wiping her tears, her voice small and shaky. "He hit me, Nail. I didn't know where else to go." Naledi's chest tightened, anger flashing behind her calm eyes, but she didn't let it show. She nodded quietly and said, "You're here now. That's what matters." Then she walked to the small kitchen corner and put water to boil. The smell of ginger and tea soon filled the air, soft and comforting. When she handed Kayla the cup, their fingers brushed, and for a moment, it felt like they were home again, just two sisters sitting together, sharing silence instead of pain. Neither of them said much after that. Kayla sipped her tea with trembling hands, and Naledi sat beside her, gently rubbing her back. Outside, the city slept. Inside, two broken hearts began to beat in rhythm again, not perfectly, but together. The rain started just after midnight, tapping gently against the window like a rhythm that filled the quiet room. Naledi and Kayla sat side by side on the couch, a dim lamp glowing between them. Neither spoke for a while. The sound of the rain made the silence feel softer, less awkward. Kayla's hands trembled as she held her cup of tea. She hadn't stopped crying since she arrived, and her voice was still shaky when she finally spoke. "It started small," she began. "He would tell me what to wear, who to talk to, even when to leave the house. I thought he just cared about me, but then it got worse." Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor as she talked. "He didn't like my friends. He didn't want me to see anyone. He said everyone was against us, even you." Naledi didn't say anything. She just listened, her eyes soft but unreadable. Kayla wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I stopped going to work sometimes because he wanted me home. And when I tried to explain, he'd get angry. I lost my job because of him, Nail. He made me believe it was my fault." Her voice broke. "I thought I could change him. I kept forgiving him because I didn't want to be alone." Her breathing grew uneven as the memories came flooding out. The yelling, the fear, the loneliness that crept in every night. And then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Tonight he hit me. I didn't even see it coming. I looked at him and realized he was gone. The man I loved wasn't there anymore." Naledi felt her throat tighten, but she stayed quiet. She didn't interrupt once, didn't rush to fill the silence. She just let Kayla pour it all out, the pain, the shame, the heartbreak. When Kayla finally stopped talking, her eyes were red and tired. She looked at her sister, almost afraid of what she'd see. But Naledi's face was calm, filled with something deeper than pity, understanding. She reached out and took Kayla's hand gently. "You didn't have to learn this way," she said softly. But I'm glad you're safe now." Those words broke Kayla all over again. She started crying harder, but this time it wasn't out of fear, it was relief. She leaned into her sister, and Naledi wrapped her arms around her tightly. For a long time, they just sat there, holding on to each other while the rain poured outside. Kayla whispered between sobs, "You were never the problem, Nick. You were what I needed all along." Naledi rested her chin on Kayla's head and closed her eye. "You're home now," she murmured. "That's enough." The rain kept falling, washing the night clean, and in that small room, two sisters finally found the truth they had both been too hurt to see. That love wasn't what broke them, it was what brought them back together. The next morning, soft sunlight slipped through the window, painting the small room in a warm glow. Naledi was already awake, sitting quietly at the edge of the bed. Kayla was still asleep on the couch, her face peaceful for the first time in what felt like forever. For a moment, Naledi just watched her, her heart aching with both love and sadness. This was her sister, broken but still here, still breathing. When Kayla finally woke up, Naledi smiled gently and handed her a glass of water. "We have things to do today," she said in a calm but firm voice. Kayla nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. Together, they got dressed and went to the police station. The walk there was quiet, only the sound of their footsteps filled the air. Kayla's hands shook as she signed the report against Tumo, but Naledi stood beside her, steady and strong. After that, Naledi helped her find a counselor. "You can't heal alone," she told her softly. "You need someone to help you talk through." Kayla agreed, her voice small but sincere. For the first time, she wasn't pretending to be strong. She was just letting herself be real. When they got home, Naledi suggested they make breakfast together. Kayla hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Like old times?" she asked. Naledi nodded. Soon, the little room was filled with the smell of frying eggs and plantain. They moved around the kitchen like they used to, bumping into each other, laughing at small mistakes, falling back into a rhythm that felt familiar and safe. As they sat down to eat, Kayla looked at her sister, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything. For what I said, for leaving you, for letting him come between us. I don't know how you can even look at me right now." Naledi put her fork down and looked at her for a long moment. "Because you're my sister," she said simply, "and forgiveness doesn't make me weak. It just means I'm choosing peace over pain." Kayla's tears spilled over, and she reached out to hold Naledi's hand. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. Naledi smiled softly. "Maybe not before," she said, "but you're trying now, and that's what matters." They finished their breakfast quietly, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt light, full of understanding, of something new beginning. After clearing the table, Kayla stood by the window, looking out at the busy street below. "Do you think we can ever go back to how we were?" she asked. Naledi walked up beside her and shook her head gently. "No," she said, "but maybe we can build something better." Kayla smiled through her tears. "Then let's do that." In that small kitchen, filled with sunlight and the smell of breakfast, the healing finally began. Not as a perfect reunion, but as two women learning to love again, this time with open hearts and honest eyes. The weeks that followed were slow but gentle, like the calm after a long storm. Kayla moved in with Naledi for a while, and though the room was small, it was filled with a quiet kind of peace. There were no raised voices, no tension in the air, just the sound of morning chatter, shared meals, and laughter slowly finding its way back between them. Every week, Kayla went to therapy. At first, it was hard. She didn't know how to open up, how to talk about the things she had buried for so long. But little by little, the walls started to fall. She learned to name what had happened: manipulation, control, emotional abuse. Words that once scared her now helped her understand. She began to see that what she went through wasn't love, it was fear disguised as care. Naledi was patient through it all. She didn't push or pry. She just showed up. Some evenings, she'd make Kayla's favorite stew, or they'd watch silly shows together until they fell asleep on the couch. The house began to feel alive again. One night, after dinner, the sisters sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The air was cool, and the hum of cars outside filled the silence between them. Kayla spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. "You know," she said, "when I called you toxic that night, I wasn't talking about you, I was talking about myself. You were just holding a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw." Naledi looked at her, eyes soft and full of understanding. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she smiled faintly and replied, "Sometimes love looks like distance. I just wish it didn't have to hurt so much to see it." The words hung in the air, heavy and beautiful at the same time. Kayla felt them sink deep into her heart. She reached over and took her sister's hand, holding it tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." Naledi squeezed her hand gently. "You're my sister. I'll always love you, but I had to love myself too. That's why I walked away." Kayla nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Now I understand," she said. "Sometimes you have to lose peace to realize who was protecting it." They sat there quietly for a while, the city buzzing softly below them. The pain between them had turned into something softer, something that no longer divided, but connected. That night, for the first time in months, both sisters went to bed with light hearts. They didn't talk about the past anymore. They didn't need to. They had already learned the lesson, that real love isn't about control or perfection, but about truth, space, and the courage to come back when the storm has passed. Months passed, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The wounds didn't disappear overnight, but they healed, quietly in their own time. Naledi and Kayla had learned to live with softness again. On a bright Saturday morning, they walked side by side through the bustling market in Accra, the air filled with the smell of fried fish, spices, and fresh fruit. Vendors called out prices, children laughed and ran between stalls, and the sisters laughed too, a sound that had once felt impossible. Kayla carried a basket filled with tomatoes and peppers while Naledi bargained with a woman over plantain. It felt simple, normal, but to them, it meant everything. Every smile, every shared glance was proof that love could survive even after being shattered. As they walked, Kayla stopped and looked at her sister for a moment. There was peace in her eyes now, something calm and grounded. She reached out and hugged Naledi tightly, holding her longer than usual. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for not giving up on me." Naledi smiled softly and hugged her back, whispering, "Always." The camera lingers on them, two sisters, once broken, now standing together, stronger than before. Naledi's voice comes in as a gentle voiceover, warm and reflective. "They called me toxic for walking away. But sometimes, walking away is how you protect love from dying." The screen fades to black as Kayla rests her head on her sister's shoulder, their laughter echoing faintly in the background. Then the final words appear on screen, simple, powerful, unforgettable. "Forgive, but don't forget what peace feels like. It's not a perfect ending, it's a real one. And sometimes that's enough."